Have you ever wondered what happens when a will promises you something specific, like a piece of art or a family heirloom, but when the time comes, that item is just gone? Maybe it was sold, maybe it was lost, who knows? It happens way more often than you'd think, and it can cause a whole lot of confusion and, frankly, disappointment. So today, we're going to get into the legal concept that deals with this exact scenario. It's called Ademption.
Okay, so let's make this real. Picture this. Your uncle's will says you get his prized 1967 Mustang. You've been dreaming about this car for years, but after he passes, you find out he had to sell it last year to cover some medical bills. So what happens now? Does that inheritance just evaporate? Do you maybe get the cash value of the car, or do you get absolutely nothing? This is the exact question that the doctrine of Ademption is designed to answer.
All right, so the official legal term for this is Ademption by extinction, and traditionally, the rule was pretty harsh. Basically, if that specific item isn't in the estate when the person dies, the gift is extinguished. Poof, it's gone. The beneficiary gets nothing. The law just kind of assumed that by getting rid of the item, the person who made the will, we call them the testator, meant to cancel that gift. But, as we're about to see, the law has definitely evolved to be a lot smarter about it.
Now here is the single most important thing to get your head around right now. Ademption only applies to specific gifts. It does not touch general gifts like a simple sum of money. And believe me, this difference is absolutely critical because the law treats a one-of-a-kind, identifiable item way differently than a gift that can just be paid out of the estate's general funds.
So let's break this down. A specific gift is unique. The key word to look for is my. It's my house at 123 Oak Street, my Rolex watch. You can point to it. A general gift, on the other hand, comes from the general pot of assets in the estate. It's $10,000 cash, not the 10 grand I hid under the mattress. It's a car, not my 1967 Mustang. See the difference? If the estate has the money, a general gift gets paid, even if the executor has to sell something else to make it happen. Ademption doesn't even come into play.
Okay, so this is where the story gets a lot better for beneficiaries, especially here in California. The state has pretty much moved away from that tough, old-school, it's gone too bad rule. The law here now really tries to figure out what the person who made the will would have wanted, and it's got some really powerful exceptions to stop a gift from failing by accident.
And this, right here, is the absolute heart of California's modern approach. The courts start from the idea that the person who wrote the will did not want the gift to fail. That's huge. It means they will actively look for ways to give the beneficiary the value of the gift instead of just shrugging and saying, tough luck, it's gone. This little presumption completely changes how these situations are handled.
So, California law basically creates these pathways for the beneficiary to get the value of that original gift, even if the gift itself is gone. Let's go back to our Mustang example. If your uncle sold it, but the buyer still owed him, say, 5 grand when he died, guess what? You're entitled to that remaining payment. Or if the car was wrecked and there was an insurance check on the way, you get that money. The value essentially follows the asset.
The law is also smart enough to know that sometimes assets don't just disappear, they just change form. They morph into something else. For example, if a will gives you stock in Company A, but Company A merged and is now Company B, you get the stock in Company B. The gift didn't really vanish, it just evolved, and your inheritance right evolves right along with it.
Now, let's dig into one of the most important protections in California law. This is a big one. What happens if the person who made the will wasn't even the one who sold the property?
Yeah, imagine the person who wrote the will became incapacitated later in life, and a court had to appoint a conservator to manage their finances. That conservator, doing their job correctly, might need to sell assets, like our classic Mustang, to pay for care. The person who made the will never intended to take back the gift, but their agent had to sell it for them. So is the beneficiary just out of luck?
And the answer, thankfully, is a firm no. If a conservator sells a specific asset, the law steps in and says the beneficiary is entitled to a cash payment equal to whatever the net proceeds were from that sale. This is an absolutely critical safeguard. It protects what the will maker wanted from being accidentally undone by the necessary actions of a conservator.
Okay, so let's flip the coin over for a minute. We've talked a lot about what happens when a gift disappears from the estate, but what happens if the beneficiary gets their gift before the person passes away?
This whole idea is called Ademption by satisfaction. So let's say your mother's will leaves you $50,000, but while she's still alive, she gives you $50,000 to help you with a down payment on a house.
Was that gift meant to be an advance on your inheritance? Can the executor later say, hey, you already got your share? Well, California law is extremely specific about this, just to prevent these kinds of misunderstandings.
Here's the deal. A simple verbal understanding is not going to cut it. For a lifetime gift to count against what you get in the will, that intention has to be in writing, period. Either the will itself has to say so, or the person giving the gift or the person receiving it has to sign a document confirming it was in advance. This is a really high bar for proof, and it's there to prevent big family fights based on who remembers what.
Okay, we have covered a lot of ground, from disappearing classic cars to lifetime cash gifts. So let's pull it all together and boil it down to the crucial points you really need to remember about Ademption here in California.
First, just know that making specific gifts can sometimes get complicated. If that asset is gone, it can create issues. Second, remember that California law is on the beneficiary's side. It will actively try to find a way to avoid Ademption. Third, whether we're talking about a gift that's gone or one given early, written intent is king. And finally, the absolute #1 best way to avoid all this confusion, just update your will after you sell or get rid of a major asset. Clarity is always the goal.
And that really leaves us with one last thing to think about for your own planning. A really well-drafted will can solve this problem before it even starts. You can include a sentence like, if I no longer own this car at my death, then I give my nephew $10,000 instead. Taking that one extra step to make your intent crystal clear is the single best way to make sure your wishes are carried out exactly the way you planned, leaving no room for anyone to doubt or argue about it later.